The topic of tariffs and reindustrialization seems to be very hot right now for obvious reasons, and certain opinions and arguments in this discussion are really starting to piss me off. That's why I decided to make this unscripted rant video in a form of response to this video by Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad. First, I would like to say that I will attack his arguments viciously and without mercy, so please enjoy.
Let's talk about the question of tariffs, shall we, and what the tariffs were meant to achieve. So, Trump's tariffs were meant to incentivize American companies to bring their manufacturing back to the United States, which would benefit Americans, working class Americans.
How? How is it going to benefit? Seriously, can someone answer me this question? It will definitely not bring back the good old days. In fact, it will create more problems, and I will answer why later in this video. For now, let's continue.
Those Americans that the left traditionally claimed to care about. Now, you may have been aware of Carl Kalinski's Twitter feed recently. He doesn't seem to be showing a great deal of compassion for working class Americans. In fact, he seems to agree with China, and I believe this is a Chinese-made AI video, which I'll play in the background just so you guys can see it, which is just really fat Americans slaving away on a sweatshop line, stitching using the old sewing machines, old-fashioned sewing machines, as if there's something wrong with this. Sorry, what's wrong with this?
I can answer that. They look extremely out of place. Not like your typical sweatshop worker would look like. Because they represent people from different societies, society of consumers, there is absolutely no way they could maintain this size doing work like this.
Exactly. For a lot of people, this kind of labor is perfectly within their remit. Right? Not everyone is 130 IQ Anglo. Not everyone is someone who is going to use their mind to earn a living. In fact, most people don't.
This is not true. Most people in the United States, and not only there, in pretty much every developed country, work in services. That is between 70 and 80% of working people. Maybe they are not all designing spaceships, but most of them require some skill, knowledge, experience. For example, salesman needs some knowledge about the market, the product, customer behavior, and things like that. Truck driver needs to have a knowledge about traffic regulations and how to secure the cargo properly. Even in production, it's quite rare to have a job where you need to mindlessly repeat the same thing like 10,000 times a day. In the West, a lot of assembly is automated and requires skilled operators. And the jobs that get outsourced to developing country are those where worker cannot be easily replaced by machine or is less expensive than the robot.
Most people are actually well and truly well suited to using their hands to earn a living. And there's nothing ignoble about this. This is not disgraceful.
But no one is claiming that. That is not the point. If someone's dream job is to work at the assembly line, that's fine. But I suspect most people work there because that's what was available to them at the moment.
This does not lower the dignity of the American person to do labor, do what is essentially kind of manual or manufacturing labor. There's nothing wrong with this kind of work. This is perfectly useful. This is the kind of work that made Britain and America rich in the first place.
No, it didn't. This is the most naive statement I have heard in a very long time. There are many reasons why some countries are rich and some are poor. And how hard their people are working has actually very little impact. Would you say those cobalt miners in Congo are poor because they are not working hard enough? Sure, their efficiency is much lower than American miner, but that's a completely different thing. American and British wealth was built mostly on trade, the very thing that the tariffs are disrupting.
And it's only those kind of pampered people like Kyle Kalinske, who went to university and did politics and now talk about politics on YouTube for a living. Well, these people make it all possible, right? The people who are making consumer electronics, Kyle uses on a daily basis. But for some reason, if Americans make these goods, that's bad. And it's actually like Kyle looks down his nose at those people who just fix things or make things. Like I used to work as a laptop repairman, right? I used to go to a laptop repair factory, I guess you call it, a shop, whatever. And I'd be given a broken laptop and there'd probably be a diagnosis with it, but if not, I'd have to figure out what's wrong with it, take it all apart, fix it, blah, 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 shove it out for testing, right? That was fine.
Okay, so what does this have to do with the topic? You worked in services, not manufacturing. I actually did work at the assembly line in a car factory when I was in college during my summer break, and it was actually soul crushing. I hated every moment of it. But that is not an argument, that is just my personal preference.
I liked that job. Like, it was a perfectly nice job. My problem was how far I had to travel to get there. That was a perfectly good job. There was nothing wrong with it. And I was fine. It's the sort of job you can put your headphones in and you sit there, and at the end of it, bam, I've made something work. I've fixed something. I have created something. Here is a thing that I have made with my own fair hands, and I can be proud of my day's work. I have been productive, literally productive. And for some reason, Kyle thinks if that's not you spurging out on YouTube, then that's bad. This is somehow beneath the dignity of Americans. It's like, okay, that's very interesting. Because what Kyle is thinking there is the Americans are some sort of Uber race, right? They are master people. They are better than everyone. Better than this. Better than getting their hands dirty. Better than using their hands to earn a living. Which is a kind of crazy perspective since he actually shares it with the Chinese Communist Party. Because what they're doing is saying, look, you don't want to be like us, do you? And it's like, well, you're quite happy doing this.
No, they need those jobs to develop to a point where they themselves become a society of consumers. And after that, they can outsource them to places like India or African countries. I'm not sure if that is the goal of Chinese Communist Party. It's possible that they want to continue being a words factory. But for Chinese people, best case scenario would be to eventually exchange those jobs for something better.
Like, if we can't be happy doing this, but you can be happy doing this. That's a crazy perspective. Because really, what the Chinese are saying here is, please don't steal our business, right? They don't want you to take manufacturing back to the United States because this is the source of their wealth. For some reason, in the late 20th century, the powers that be decided it was wise to impoverish the Western working classes by just exporting all of our manufacturing.
No, that's completely wrong. There is actually very little wealth in manufacturing. Let me explain this. Let's say we have a product. Let's call it bulbulator. To produce bulbulator at the very bottom of the chart, you require natural resources. Often they come from very poor countries that we call banana republics, because most of their GDP is generated by either agriculture or mining natural resources. They are the ones that usually get screwed over the most. Extremely small percent of the final price of the product goes to them. Those resources rarely come from developed countries. Usually, after reaching this level of development, countries start to close down their mines, leaving only extraction of the most valuable, like oil. Next, those resources are turned into production components. Those are usually produced in developing countries like China, but sometimes might require advanced technologies or know-how In that case, they might be produced in US or Europe and shipped to China for final assembly. Then, after we have all the needed parts, factory in China makes those vibrators on the assembly line. After that, they get shipped to the US. So you need to add the cost of shipping, customs, then of course tariffs. You need to transport the goods from the port to your warehouse, then to local stores. On top of that, you need to promote the product. And often this takes the largest percentage of the chart for the final cost. Like at least 50% of the budget will go to marketing. And finally, the store takes like between 10 or 20% of margin. So as you can see on this chart, most of it stays in the US. It goes to truck drivers, warehouse workers, salesmen, entertainment industry, influencers, YouTubers, and so on. Only a tiny fraction goes to China. This is how global economy works. And honestly, I feel a little bit awkward explaining this to a intelligent, educated person. It's like those days people think that factories in China poop out products out of nothing, which magically gets teleported to their local stores, so they can buy it, and all the profits goes to China to fill Xi Jinping honey addiction or something like that.
Especially when it's cheap consumer tax, to Eastern plants where they would pay them $1 a day. Now, wages in the Orient and various other places have gone up, so it's not like they're trapped in this forever. But that just means, well, what's the big deal about having them in China now, right? Whereas China, now that they're there, okay, I'm not going to move them. But China's like, okay, well, we want to keep them, which is why they're trying to demoralize you and make you think, no, I couldn't possibly do this. This is a perfectly good job. Like, I've worked in factories. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with factory work. If you can put a headphone in, which in a lot of these cases I'm sure you'd be able to, because you're not doing anything that requires you to actually interface with any other people, I don't see a problem with it. Like, I've been able to do this in the past, especially if it's not in like a sanitized environment. I worked in a milk factory once, a St. Ivel factory, so the entire place smelled like puke. Obviously, you couldn't have things in your ears there because of germs and whatnot. But and so that was pretty rough. I didn't enjoy that much. But again, I'm on the right-hand side of the bell curve, right? Well, at least a third of the population are on the left-hand side of the bell curve. And okay, fine, Kyle. I can see you being like, well, I'm above factory work. Yeah, you might be, but you're not representative of everyone in the country. And actually, there's a good third of the people who are just locked out of doing anything with their minds, academic work, by dint of the fact that they're not that bright.
There is still plenty of work low IQ people can do in developed countries. It's not like Western countries suffer from very high unemployment. It's usually around 5%. And a lot of businesses have shortages of workers. Do we really need those extra manufacturing jobs? You cannot find people to work at McDonald's, but you will find them for a night shift at a sweatshop, right? Or maybe we can bring back those jobs together with the workers, like millions of Chinese people overnight. That will definitely help the housing market, right? Was this Trump's master plan all along?
And that's not a judgment. I'm not saying that these are bad people. I'm not saying these people don't deserve houses. I'm not saying they don't deserve the opportunity to work hard and earn a good living with the sweat of their brow. This is noble for them, right? I'm not expecting, like, God forbid, we were being judged on our ability to dunk, right? I enjoyed basketball when I was a kid. I couldn't dunk because I'm 5'9", right? I can't jump high enough to dunk. So I would have been judged very poorly on that metric. Why would we want to judge these people who themselves wouldn't claim to be academic? They wouldn't say, hang on a second, I've got an IQ of 90. I deserve to be making policy at the highest echelons of government. They're humble people. They don't think that way. What they think is, I would just like the opportunity to work hard, earn a good living, and provide for my family. And that's really something they're completely entitled to. And we shouldn't actually be denigrating, because the only people that helps are people elsewhere, our competitors, people who seek to is essentially dethrone the West from its position of wealth, power, and authority. And so it's a very peculiar thing watching Kyle Kalinske essentially side with the Chinese Communist Party, saying, no, this work is too good for you Americans. You're not allowed to be doing this. Trust us, bro. We ought to be doing that job and making that money. It's like, no, I'd rather our people do those jobs and make that money and be contributing, happy, flourishing, able to buy houses, able to put their kids through college, blah, 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 rather than these people.
Now, this is probably the most important thing that he said this entire video. This is not about "they took our jobs." It's about bringing back the good old days, when grandpa was working at the factory and from his wage was able to provide for a family of 10 and bought his house for $5,000, which current market value is like 5 million. So for a simple mind that doesn't know much about economy and shit, the correlation is simple. Back then we were producing things and it was good, and now we are not producing things and it is bad. So it's the fault of this goddamn Chinaman producing our sneakers. It's not like the problem is with America, that is most free and the best country on earth. It's not like properties are now treated like investment rather than places where we can raise our families in, driving the prices higher and higher. It's because the Chinaman took our job and is working for a bowl of rice. And the price of the college tuition also grew like 1,000% since the 80s. Why is China doing this to our kids, putting them in so much debt and stuff? It's really easy to blame some people on completely different continent for your own problems. But the reality is that bringing back manufacturing will not solve anything. You will need to bring more migrants to work in them, deal with pollution and waste, and in return you will get more inflation and lower purchasing power for a working class, and you will not gain any wealth out of this.
And it's not that I've got anything against these people. I don't know these people. I've got no connection to these people, and I really don't trust their government. I think their government has evil designs on us, which is why they make this kind of AI nonsense to demoralize us. And another thing that keeps coming up is, okay, well, look, you don't want to work in a sweatshop, do you? It's like, I mean, I've done worse, right? I used to clean nightclub toilets. Trust me, working in a sweatshop, definitely not the lowest of the low or anything like that by any standard, right? But Geoffrey Miller here makes a good point, right? When journalists say, I wouldn't want to work in a factory, so no American should have to work in a factory, what's hilarious about this, who cares what a journalist thinks? Who cares what Kyle Kalinske thinks, right? There are lots of people who are just fine working in factories. And in fact, you get a kind of team spirit, a camaraderie in these factories. I always felt like a bit of an outsider with the other people I was working on the lines with, because I didn't know them. Because I was there for like a month or 2 months or something, and they'd been there 20 years, because this suits them. This suits them as a habit of life, right? But anyway, journalists don't want to work in a factory. That's fine, bro. Not everyone has to work in a factory. But they are imagining stereotyped 1920s assembly line where workers are doing the same repetitive movements all day, the type of work that is actually easiest and most obvious thing to automate these days. That's exactly correct. They are expecting to be treated like the Chinese sweatshop labourer, which for some reason is fine for the Chinese, but it's not good enough for Americans. You know, they're the equality people, by the way. They fine for those guys, not for our guys, right? Okay, fine. But also, it's just not how it works, right? For example, this is in the Wall Street Journal 7 years ago. The robot revolution, automation comes to fashion, right? And he's just showing you here. Look, the machines can do all of this now. If I can mute it. Right? The machines do all of this now automatically. So you don't need to stitch by hand, because actually robotics and automation, and they show us a bit in the beginning of this as well, has significantly caught up with what is possible to do, and is actually quicker and more efficient and has less mistakes than a human doing it. So the humans just need to essentially check things at the end of it, rather and just make sure the machines aren't breaking, rather than do the back-breaking quote unquote labor of stitching. Again, there's nothing wrong with the job, but rather than doing that work themselves, actually we do have robots now to do this.
Commercial industrial robots started to replace workers in 70s. By now, most jobs that could easily be replaced by robots already did so. So it's not that easy. Also, this might be the hottest take of this entire video, but I think that in large numbers of jobs, humans will always be cheaper than robots. That is because robots are expensive to purchase and maintenance, require skilled technicians, operators, and people to supervise their work, and will require replacement after a decade or two. Meanwhile, humans are cheap and easy to produce. Actually, they produce themselves when they are bored. You just need to take their contraceptives away. Their operating cost is low, just like a bag of rice a day and some water. They do require some supervision, but the guy doing that work just needs to know how to operate a whip. And depending on how hard you exploit them, they should last you between 30 to 40 years. The only drawback is that for the first few years of their life, their usefulness is quite limited. This is actually a premise of a sci-fi novel I'm working on, which takes place in the future where AI and androids take all the most important and well-paid jobs, replacing current elites, and humans are left with all the physical labor. So before I finish this video, I will share my opinions about the tariffs. They are absolutely retarded idea. It's just another tax that the consumer will have to pay in the end, that is going to accomplish nothing except disrupting production chains and global trade routes, and they will probably not last very long. Tariffs can be put to a good use, and also I think we should bring back some manufacturing, like computer chips and other high-tech electronics, because they are of strategic importance and never should have been outsourced in the first place. Obviously, factories cannot be built in a month, so tariffs should be increased gradually and announced in advance, not like this. Thankfully, this trade war is mostly affecting the US and China, and since I am from Poland, I am not affected by this that much. Warsaw stock market is doing well, złoty is getting stronger, our purchasing power is growing. The US might be a bit unpredictable for business, and we might feel some gaps created in the process. But eventually US will be able to recover their losses, unless they have another bright idea. Anyway, thanks for watching, bye.